My reflection this morning honors our Unitarian Universalist Christian heritage. And I have to acknowledge that, I don't want to make this too political this morning, but I have to acknowledge that I'm very, very annoyed by the radical religious right's position on Christianity. And I do think that it is important that as Unitarian and Universalists, we remember that Christianity was our inheritance of a kind that affirmed love, divine love, human love, parental love, grandparenting love, all kinds of love. And I think it's important that we focus on it now and again, and I'm even thinking about writing a book on why. I chose this theme this morning, Why Then a Donkey, because I believe that stories about and told by Jesus describing him as prophet, teacher, and healer have as much to say today as when he lived, and much to say to we UUs. The prophetic side of Jesus conveyed in profound truths about love, forgiveness, and justice. And his prophetic side, the justice side, is resonating with me today. So I want to ask a question. How many of you at one time before you became UUs were any form of Christian? Keep your hands up. How many of you still look to your Christian heritage for anything? And how many of you, put your hands down now, and how many of you have totally rejected what you were taught in Christianity? And hands down, and how many of you are just indifferent to Christianity? Okay. Now, that might surprise our singers up here and musicians, but we are a very loving kind of religion, and we're very welcoming in the sense that we welcome people of many, many different faiths. We, I think, live out our values in a way that is living out the message of Jesus. And yet, we don't really see the connection because too much emphasis has been put on Christianity per se as a patriarchal religion versus the humanity of a loving being who preached in ancient times and who emulates for us what it is to be a being of love, and that is namely Jesus. Now, a prophet back in the day, how many of you like history and remember the Roman Empire period? Oh, good. Back in the day, not personally, I don't either personally, but even if you don't read the history books, the movies take you there sometimes. A prophet in the Jewish tradition at the time of Jesus was usually viewed by those supporting the status quo as a problem person, an agitator, and a troublemaker. Yet the prophets of old spoke a minority, dissonant, but truthful word. Problem people who are considered prophets are really courageous visionaries trying to change an unjust system. Some defined a prophet as one who can see undetermined future results of current actions as trends. Now, former congressman and civil rights hero John Lewis turned around the word troublemaker with the phrase good trouble and gave it an inspiring legacy. Today, the phrase good trouble is of enduring significance in the ongoing fight for human rights. Jesus made good trouble, including on the Sunday before Easter, referred to as Palm Sunday, the day Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. His choice of donkey was an act representing humility, peace, and a contrast to the grandeur and power often associated with kings and conquerors who rode majestic war horses in triumph. As is written in the Gospel of Mark, what later became Palm Sunday was the day, quote, many people spread their cloaks on the road while others spread branches they had cut in the fields. The symbolism of palms in this context is profound. In ancient times, palms were a symbol of victory and triumph. The act of spreading branches and cloaks on the road was a gesture of honor, of celebration. It signified that the arrival of Jesus was seen as a momentous occasion. He was a new kind of leader, insightful, yet humble, as symbolized by his donkey, yet a leader that was worthy of reverence and respect. The cheering people were acknowledging Jesus as their leader, someone who brought hope and change. Now imagine all of us in a parade of let's just say palms and coats under us, walking into D.C., and people hailing us as the new leaders. Yeah, get the picture? The jubilant symbolism threatened the entrenched powers of the religious leaders maintaining the status quo. That was their status quo at the time was not threatening the Roman Empire, who had subjugated Israel. And when I was in parochial high school during the week between Palm Sunday and Easter, which is called Holy Week, we had a retreat began the day after Palm Sunday. Our Catholic Church was literally built in the shape of a cross. So you would come up the center and it had two spin-offs in the shape of a cross. I once had a wedding cake designed in that shape. And I remember in that retreat how each day we had to follow the stations of the cross that were all throughout the church. And Stations of the Cross, for you who don't know, depict the last day of Jesus. At each station, we were to stop and meditate on the specific event represented, beginning with Jesus' condemnation. After spending time to meditate, we said a prayer and moved on to the next station. Unfortunately, the image of Jesus riding on a donkey into Jerusalem with the donkey stepping on to a palm and coke-covered road through lines of people waving jubilantly is not one of the stations of the cross. But if we did use Jesus' entry as a prologue or first of 15, instead of not there of 14, we could focus on why Jesus rode a donkey on his triumphant ride, an act representing humility, peace, yet still claiming leadership, and a contrast to the grandeur and power often associated with kings and emperors, and to bring it to modern language, dictators. One of the most cited reasons is that unlike numerous kings and conquering generals before him, who had rode into Jerusalem on a powerful horse over the years, Jesus rode a donkey to fulfill one of multi beliefs about the Messiah described by the prophet Zechariah, a minor prophet in the Jewish scriptures. Zechariah predicted that the future Messiah would be a humble king who would come to them riding on the colt of a donkey. By riding a donkey, Jesus was communicating his message of peace, humility, and service, demonstrating that true greatness is found through loving service, uplifting the marginalized, the oppressed, and the humble. He created a message through his 3 years of ministry that was a message about his being as well as what he said, a being of love. Can you imagine what we would be like if we were beings of love? I try to be, but I'm not a being of love all the time. Now, over time, the concept of the Messiah in Jewish scriptures evolved to represent a future savior and deliverer who would bring salvation and restoration to his people, the people of Israel. Zechariah actually envisioned the Messiah as a king and a priest, uniting two vital roles that were typically distinct. Palm Sunday, therefore, recognizes that a leader could also be a spiritual being, a being of love, an emotion we can't touch. But boy, can we feel it, can't we, when we're loved. Let's just take a moment and imagine someone who loves you, either someone in your life now or someone in your past history of living. And that person is looking at you, and you look into that person's eyes. Can you feel it? Can you? So Palm Sunday isn't just a recollection of a historical event, but a reminder of the values Jesus embodied. And truthfully, when I learned of our new proposed values last year that were centered in love and that we passed, I, who was one of the rejectors, shall we say, was amazed at how in our language of today, in our pluralistic language that doesn't want to single out any specific religion, how close they are to the values that Jesus lived. The use of palms underscores the triumph of these values over oppression, and the importance of courageous acts in the pursuit of a better world. The call for good trouble echoes through history. Maybe it wasn't called that until John Lewis, but it's been there all along, finding parallels in various social movements in which individuals stood up against systemic injustices. A purposeful challenge to the oppressive structures in the here and now and in the past. Other eras of significant societal change have seen similar confrontations between forces of good, inclusivity, pluralism, equity, justice, and what we need today. We're in a time where we need to take the calmness that a bridge over troubled water brings to us and keep that as our source as we understand that this is a time of empire. And this time needs us. There's an urgent call for good trouble today in this country. Listen to the following words spoken by our president relating to the current economic crisis. This he said during a press conference on April 7th. Quote, "You know, our country was the strongest, believe it or not, from 1870 to 1913. You know why? It was all tariff-based. We had no income tax. Then in 1913, he continued, some genius came up with the idea of let's charge the people of our country an income tax, which of course might have been needed to arm a military in a threatened world. The period that the U.S. president is referring to is called the Gilded Age of America. The Gilded Age is an era marked by significant industrialization, urbanization, the expansions of railroads, and corporate leaders referred to as robber barons. It was a time of stark social contrast, with immense wealth accumulating in the hands of a few, while most lived in dire poverty. The term Gilded Age, coined by Mark Twain and Charles W. Warner, aptly describes this period where the glittering surface masked deep social issues. But the Gilded Age called forth reformers. Amidst the wealth and power of industrialists and political machines, labor movements began to gain momentum. Workers sought better wages, better hours, and better conditions. Just the memory here of my past. I remember I was the oldest, my mother used to let me stay up and watch the late movies with her when my father, who would be at work for 4 or 5 days at a time. And powerhouses of the time of the 40s, I guess, were depicting this time in the movies. The rises of unions, people that were fought literally as if they were in war. So this phenomenon of the Gilded Age is one that our president seems to have as his example when we think of making America great again. I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to skip the history and just summarize it in a sentence here, that the Gilded Age moved into the progressive era because of reforms, and also World War II. But the reforms were partly because of World War II. And since the 70s and 80s, the progressive era has been under attack, leading to what we have today. So it isn't just the current president. It's been a movement that's been going on for almost 50 years. So, as religious people who are trying to live out the values that we affirmed and voted for, we need to have models. Now, for me, it is Jesus. For you, it may be somebody entirely different. It really doesn't matter as long as your model is one, a being of loving resistance. Struggle and resistance are what we're in for, but we can't lose who we are. The beings of humanity, the descendants of the prophets. We might have the courage necessary to struggle for social reform and to resist injustice without the personal empowerment that is sustained in communities struggling and resisting together. Now, in my remembrance of Mill Creek, there was quite a bit of interest in transformation of the conditions that really were kicked into motion in the 70s and 80s, like mass incarceration. I don't know where you are today. I haven't been here in a long time, and you weren't there when I was. But I know that struggle and resistance are best sustained in communities that are doing it together. Together. And it's best done with a focus on what you want to achieve. So I'm going to ask you, are you focused as a congregation in this time of threat in an area that you want to protect or change back? I am. Hands. Some of you. I'm going to ask that if I come back here and I ask such a question, that it's going to be all hands. All hands. And I'm going to also ask that you make sure that the path of Jesus is included in your education for your children and in your adult education. In some contemporary way, there's great new books out there written by UUs for UUs. Jesus' message for healing, connecting, and transforming communities is a model for love and resistance, making good trouble, as I described. If you think that love isn't enough, that that living as a being of love, let's say, isn't enough, then I want to give you the words from a speech given by Václav Havel, a human symbol of democracy and human rights, who was himself not a self-described Christian, but who followed the sentiment of Christianity. He was Václav Havel, was a playwright, dissident prisoner, and former president of the Czech Republic. And he gave this address to the U.S. Congress in 1990, well, actually the ending of his address in 1990, after the fall of the Soviet Union, which subjugated his country and caused the Czech and Slovak people unimaginable suffering. And of course, we know today Putin's trying to resurrect the former Soviet Union. As he ended the speech, Havel said, "What I'm trying to say is this. It doesn't have to be merely assistance from the well-educated, powerful, and wealthy to someone who has nothing and therefore has nothing to offer in return. We too can offer something, our experience and the knowledge that has come from it. The specific experience I'm talking about has given me one certainty. Consciousness preceded being, and not the other way around, as the Marxists claim. For this reason, the salvation of this human world lies nowhere else than in the human heart, in the human power to reflect, in human meekness and in human responsibility. Without a global revolution in the sphere of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better the sphere of our being as humans, and the catastrophe towards which this world is headed." Jesus knew that his life was at risk by doing the simple act of riding a donkey. I'm not suggesting that you go right out and put your life at risk. Simple acts matter. Powers that be are wary of these acts and their significance in challenging the current status quo. One protesting immigrant can be the spark for a massive movement of change. We need to follow our values, our convictions, our principles and purpose and to act to effectuate the change we see needed. Václav Havel ended his speech with these words: "The salvation of this human world lies nowhere other than in the human heart."